Some nights are too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice your own breathing, where the wind outside moves gently but somehow feels wrong. It's in that stillness that certain stories come alive, not from the mouths of the living, but from the places the living avoid, from the mountains, the seas, the shadows in the corners of old rooms. Tonight you will hear 10 true tales, each one a piece of history, each one a moment where ordinary life cracked and something dark came through. They are not sudden screams in the dark, they are slow, quiet moments before something unthinkable happens. The sound of a door latch shifting when you're alone, the way a candle flickers when there's no breeze. These stories will carry you from frozen mountains to empty oceans, from silent farmhouses to skies lit by impossible light. They are all real, the facts are recorded, the details are there for anyone who dares to look. So close your eyes. Let the night settle in around you and listen, because some truths refuse to sleep. Story 1. The Dyatlov Pass Incident, 1959, Ural Mountains, Russia. It began with 9 friends, young, strong, experienced hikers. They left for the mountains in January 1959, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. The Ural Mountains were known for their bitter winters, endless fields of snow, winds that cut through every layer of clothing. But to them, this was a challenge, not a threat. They took photographs along the way, smiling faces framed by snow-covered peaks. Their campfire smoke curled up into a sky as pale as glass. They were heading toward a remote mountain the local Mansi people called Kholat. Its name means dead mountain. On the night of February 1st, they pitched their tent on the slope. The snow fell quietly, the temperature dropped to -30 degrees, and sometime in the dark, something went wrong. When search teams finally found the tent, weeks later it was still standing, but it had been slashed open from the inside, boots, coats, gloves, all neatly arranged, untouched, as if they had left in a hurry into a blizzard. The first bodies were found under a thin layer of snow, wearing only light clothing. 2 were beside the remains of a small fire, their hands and feet badly burned. Others were found later with strange violent injuries. 1 had a fractured skull. 2 had broken ribs so severe it looked as though they'd been hit by something impossible to imagine. Another, a young woman, was missing her tongue, and there were other odd details. Some of their clothes carried traces of radiation. Witnesses in nearby villages reported strange orange lights in the sky that same night. The official conclusion, a vague phrase, a compelling natural force, but to this day no one can agree on what happened. An avalanche, a secret Soviet military test, a sudden panic from an unidentified threat, or something older and stranger in the mountain snow. The site is now called Dyatlov Pass. Visitors say the air there feels heavier than it should, and when the wind moves across the peaks it carries a sound like distant voices, calling from somewhere far below the ice. Story 2. The HINTERKAIFECK Murders, 1922, Bavaria, Germany. The last days of March in 1922 brought the first signs of spring to the Bavarian countryside. Snow was melting. The fields of HINTERKAIFECK were wet with thawed earth. But something about the farmstead seemed wrong. Neighbours noticed there was no smoke from the chimney. No one tending the animals. No one walking the muddy road into town. When they went to check, they found the barn door slightly open. Inside, the silence was thick, almost solid. In the hay, 4 bodies lay crumpled together. Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, and Victoria's young daughter. All had been struck in the head with a heavy mattock. In the house, the scene was just as grim. The youngest child, only 2 years old, lay dead in her crib. The maid, hired just the day before, had been murdered in her bed. 6 people, all gone. The oddest part? It seemed the killer had stayed. The cattle had been fed, the chimney held fresh smoke, food had been prepared in the kitchen, and yet the doors were locked tight from the inside. In the month before, the family had complained of strange happenings. Footsteps in the attic when no one was up there, a strange newspaper in the house that no one had bought, keys going missing, and days before the murders, footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the house, but none leading back. The murders remain unsolved. Some say it was a stranger hiding in the attic for weeks. Others believe it was someone the family knew, someone who could enter without fear. The HINTERKAIFECK farm was eventually torn down, but locals still say the air there feels colder than it should, and when the wind blows through the trees, it carries the sound of creaking floorboards and footsteps overhead. Story 3. The Mary Celeste, 1872, Atlantic Ocean. The ocean has its own kind of silence, a deep rolling quiet that swallows sound, and in December of 1872, that silence hid a mystery still unsolved. The merchant ship Mary Celeste had been at sea for less than a month. She left New York carrying barrels of industrial alcohol, bound for Italy. Her crew was experienced. The captain, Benjamin Briggs, had brought along his wife and their 2-year-old daughter. Then, she vanished. Not sunk, not burned, just gone. Weeks later, another vessel, the DYATLOV, spotted her drifting between Portugal and the Azores. The Mary Celeste was moving under full sail, as if guided by invisible hands. But when the DYATLOV's crew boarded her, the truth became stranger. There was no one aboard, no captain, no crew, no family. The ship's cargo was intact. The food stores were untouched. Personal belongings, clothing, pipes, even the captain's log, all in place. But the lifeboat was missing. The last entry in the log was dated 10 days earlier. It mentioned nothing unusual. The only odd detail, some of the barrels of alcohol had leaked, filling parts of the ship with sharp fumes. But why would an experienced crew abandon a perfectly seaworthy vessel in the middle of the ocean, especially when the weather was calm? Some believe they feared an explosion from the leaking alcohol and took to the lifeboat only to be lost at sea. Others whisper about pirates or mutiny, and there are those who suggest something less human. What remains is this: the Mary Celeste sailed on without her crew, empty and ghostly, until she was towed into port, her decks washed clean by salt and time, her true story swallowed by the Atlantic, where it still drifts, somewhere between fact and nightmare. Story 4. The Pollock Twins, 1957, Hexham, England. Some mysteries begin with tragedy, and this one began on a quiet Sunday morning in 1957. In the small town of Hexham, England, 2 young sisters, Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock, were walking to church. A car came around the corner far too fast. It struck the girls, killing them instantly. They were only 11 and 6 years old. Their parents, John and Florence, were devastated. But less than a year later, Florence discovered she was pregnant again, and in 1958 she gave birth to twin girls, Gillian and Jennifer. From the moment they could speak, the twins startled their parents. They began asking for toys that had belonged to Joanna and Jacqueline, toys they had never seen before. They recognized places they had never visited, and they described moments from the sisters' lives with eerie accuracy. One day, the family visited the old neighborhood. The twins pointed out landmarks, the school, the park, the church, without being told what they were. Jennifer even had a birthmark on her body in the exact place where Jacqueline had a scar. As the twins grew older, these memories began to fade. By age 7, the girls no longer spoke of the past. They lived normal lives, but John and Florence never forgot. Was it grief shaping their perception, or had Joanna and Jacqueline somehow found their way back? Cases like this have been studied by researchers of reincarnation, and the Pollock twins remain one of the most famous. There is no proof. only 2 lives cut short, and 2 more who seemed to remember. Story 5. The Devil's Footprints, 1855, Devon, England. It was a bitterly cold night in February of 1855. Snow had fallen thick across the countryside of Devon, England. By morning, the world was white and still, but when villagers stepped outside, they saw something strange. Footprints, single file, stretching in a perfect line across the snow. At first, that might not seem unusual, but these tracks were unlike anything they had seen before. Each print was about 4 inches long, shaped like a cloven hoof, and they did not wander or meander. They went straight, over fields, through gardens, across rooftops. Some even appeared to pass through walls, entering one side of a building and exiting the other with no sign of disturbance. The trail covered more than 100 miles in total. People followed them for as long as they could, but eventually the prints vanished into the frozen wilderness. In the days that followed, theories spread. Some said it was a hoax, others thought it was an escaped kangaroo or some unknown animal. But many whispered something older, darker, that the devil himself had walked through Devon that night, searching for something or someone. Whatever made those tracks never returned, but every heavy snowfall in Devon brings back the same unease, that somewhere, just beyond sight, something might be walking again. Story 6. The VILLISCA Axe Murders, 1912, Iowa, USA. On a summer night in June of 1912, the small town of VILLISCA, Iowa, went to sleep as it always did. Doors were locked, oil lamps went dark, crickets filled the warm air. In the Moore household, 8 people slept under one roof. Josiah and Sarah Moore, their 4 children, and 2 young friends who had been invited for a sleepover. At some point after midnight, someone entered the house. No one heard them, no one woke up. The killer moved from room to room, striking each victim in the head with Josiah's own axe. Some were attacked while they slept. Others may have woken in the final moments. When it was over, all 8 were dead. The horror didn't end there. The killer stayed in the house for hours. They covered the mirrors with cloth. They drew the shades. They prepared a plate of food in the kitchen, but I never ate it. And in one strange detail, they placed a piece of raw bacon beside a small kerosene lamp at the foot of the bed. By morning, the Moore home was silent. Neighbours became suspicious when no one emerged to start the day. When the door was opened, what they found shocked the entire town. The investigation lasted years. Several suspects were arrested, including a travelling preacher who had confessed, then taken it back. But no one was ever convicted. Today the house still stands. It has become a place for overnight stays, for those curious enough to test its silence. Many who've spent the night say they hear footsteps in the attic, or whispers in the children's room. And some claim that in the stillest hours before dawn, they hear the faint creak of an axe being lifted. Story 7. The Greenbrier Ghost, 1897, West Virginia, USA. It began with a sudden death. In January of 1897, a young woman named Zona Heastershoe was found lying at the foot of the stairs in her home. Her body was placed in bed, dressed in a high-neck gown, and prepared for burial before a proper examination could be made. The doctor who came to certify the death said it was everlasting faint. Some whispered it was childbirth complications. But Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, wasn't convinced. She believed her daughter had been murdered, and she claimed she knew who had done it because Zona had told her. Mary Jane said that over the course of 4 nights, her daughter's spirit appeared at her bedside. The ghost spoke softly, describing how her husband, Erasmus Shue, had been cruel. On the night she died, she said, he had attacked her in a rage, breaking her neck. To prove it, she showed her mother by turning her ghostly head completely around. Mary Jane went to the local prosecutor with her story. It should have been dismissed as superstition, but the prosecutor agreed to have Zona's body exhumed. When they examined her, they found exactly what the ghost had claimed. Her neck had been broken. Erasmus Shue was arrested, tried, and convicted of her murder. To this day, it is the only recorded case in the United States where the testimony of a ghost was officially part of a murder trial. Whether you believe Mary Jane truly saw her daughter's spirit, or whether it was a desperate mother's way of forcing the truth into the light, one thing is certain: Zona's story still lingers in Greenbrier County, and some say if you walk the hills on a cold January night, you might see her, standing in the dark, waiting to speak again. Story 8. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Disappearance. 1900, Scotland. The Flannan Isles are a lonely cluster of rocks off the coast of Scotland. Wind lashes the cliffs year-round. The sea crashes endlessly against the stone. It is a place where silence and isolation feel alive. In December of 1900, the lighthouse on the largest island suddenly went dark. Passing ships noticed. The light was supposed to burn every night, guiding sailors away from the dangerous rocks. But for several days, nothing. A relief vessel was sent. When it arrived, the crew saw no movement, no sign of life. They docked and climbed the steep path to the lighthouse. Inside, they found the clock stopped, the beds unmade, the table set for a meal that had never been eaten. 3 men had been stationed there: James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. All were gone. One oilskin coat was missing from its hook, but the others were still there, suggesting at least one man had gone outside in harsh weather without proper gear. On the logbook, the last entry was strange. It spoke of a violent storm, of fear, of men praying, but according to weather records, the skies had been calm on those days. Searchers found no bodies, no wreckage, no signs of a struggle. Theories range from a giant rogue wave sweeping them into the sea, to a fight among the men, to something less earthly rising from the waves. The lighthouse was manned again, but its new keepers reported hearing voices in the wind and strange knocks on the heavy doors at night. Today, the Flannan light is automated, and the island stands empty except for the gulls and whatever else still walks there. Story 9. The Mothman Sightings, 1966 to 1967, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It began on a cold November night in 1966. 2 young couples were driving near an old military munition site outside Point Pleasant, West Virginia. They saw something in the headlights, something large with glowing red eyes. It spread enormous wings and took to the air, following their car at speeds they couldn't believe. When they reached town, they told police what they'd seen. They called it a man with wings. In the months that followed, more people reported sightings. A tall, dark figure, eyes like burning coals. Sometimes it stood on the road, other times it soared silently overhead. Dogs barked and refused to go outside, and strange lights were seen moving in the sky. The creature came to be known as the Mothman. Then, in December of 1967, tragedy struck. The Silver Bridge, connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed during rush hour. 46 people died. After that night, the sightings stopped. Some believe the Mothman was a warning, a harbinger of disaster. Others think it was something drawn to tragedy itself. Skeptics say it was nothing more than a misidentified bird, a large heron or owl. But those who saw it swear it was no ordinary creature, and every year when the anniversary of the bridge collapse approaches, a few locals still glance toward the sky, half hoping to see it again, half praying they never will. Story 10. The Tunguska Event, 1908, Siberia, Russia. It happened just after 7 in the morning on June 30th, 1908. Deep in the remote Siberian wilderness, the sky split open. Witnesses, even those hundreds of miles away, saw a blinding flash. Then came the sound, a deafening roar, like the earth itself was breaking. Moments later, a shockwave flattened entire forests. When explorers finally reached the area, they found more than 80 million trees, lying in a perfect radial pattern, all pointing away from the blast's center. The ground was scorched, wildlife had vanished, and yet there was no crater. Theories came quickly. Some said a meteorite had exploded in the atmosphere. Others believed it was a comet, its icy core vaporizing before hitting the ground. But there were stranger ideas too. A few claimed it was the result of a secret weapon test. Others pointed to eyewitness accounts of strange lights in the sky the night before, moving as if guided. And some whispered about something not from this world at all, arriving and then vanishing without a trace. More than a century later, the Tunguska site remains eerily quiet. The forest has regrown, but deep in the soil, scientists still find signs of a blast unlike anything nature normally produces. Whatever happened that morning in Siberia came and went in less than a minute, but its mystery still echoes across the world. And so the night carries these 10 true stories, events that began like any other day, and ended in ways no one can fully explain. From mountains of snow to empty seas, from silent farmhouses to skies lit by fire, each leaves behind the same thing, questions that may never be answered. Perhaps that's why they linger in the mind long after they're told, not for the horror alone, but for the space they leave, the gap between truth and the unknown. As you close your eyes tonight, remember, the world does not sleep as deeply as we think. Somewhere, even now, a story is beginning, and one day it may find its way to you.